All right, market starting the week off on a negative note. The Dow down about 368 points and then some. NASDAQ taking it on the chin, as usually what happens when interest rates back up. A lot of people after an awful September saying, oh, get ready for, rocky October. Often is like that. Not all the time. I wonder if Mark Cuban is worried. Of course, he became a billionaire, zigging while others are zagging, finding opportunity in the middle of some sell-offs, and just the opposite. Mark joins us right now. Of course, you know him as the entrepreneur, investor, philanthropist, owner of the Dallas Mavericks, a billionaire many times over. Mark, very good to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Neil.
All right. Mark, we're trying to address some audio issues we're having with you, so if you'll indulge us here. One thing I did want to get your take on is the market right now. After the crazy September, and maybe owing to dysfunction in Washington, concerns about China, backup in rates that apparently isn't just transitory, are you worried for these markets?
Yeah, I'm having really hard trouble with your audio as well. Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned with everything that's going on. There's so many outside forces that are having an impact, whether it's government, whether it's China, whether it's immigration. There's so many things that people are paying attention to, and it's really hard to know what to expect next.
What about cryptocurrencies? You have not, shied people away from them, but you've essentially said do your homework. I think to quote, you said you don't have to become a Bitcoin expert. You need to have a handle on how it could affect your business. What did you mean by that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, Neil?
Well, you said that on Bitcoin, for example, that you have to essentially do your homework. I guess referring to the possibility not a lot of people are. Does that worry you?
No, I mean, look, Bitcoin's a little bit of a different animal as crypto as a whole. Bitcoin is really a great alternative store of value. I think it's a better alternative than gold, but not all crypto is the same. So you put you put Bitcoin in one category of store of value. Then you move to things like Ethereum. Ethereum is really a significant network, and because of their smart contracts and their security and their their ability to have distributed management, I think you're going to see a lot of unique business applications occur. I'm investing in things like this, decentralized insurance applications, decentralized ways to distribute NFTs, which allow for things like 3D printing files, textbooks, so many different applications. It's very analogous to what we saw in the early days of the internet when we went from analog to digital. There's things that you didn't expect transition, but I think you're going to see the same thing here now with crypto, where smart contracts will create a whole new type of application that will have a significant impact first on financial applications, then on traditional business processes.
Don't you accept Bitcoin for Mavericks game tickets, merchandise, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Yeah, we do. Not a lot of people pay in Bitcoin because it's really an appreciable asset. Right. Like I said, it's a store of value, and they want it to go up in value. So you won't see people paying for it. But a lot of people pay in Dogecoin. We sell thousands and thousands of dollars per month during the off season. And once the season starts, I expect that to happen per week in Dogecoin. And that's really because it's easy to spend, and it doesn't appreciate so much that people want to hold it forever.
But when it comes to Dogecoin, I think you revealed that you had only about $500 worth. Did I read that right?
Yeah, it's about $1,500 worth because I bought a little bit more for fun. But okay. Yeah, I mean, I've never told anybody it's a great investment. I've often said that it's a great way to get to understand how cryptocurrency works, how to invest in the market, and and it's a better investment than a lottery ticket if you're trying to try to hit a home run.
Yeah. Let me ask you about your players. If any one of them wanted to be paid partly or in full Bitcoin, would you?
Yeah, I mean, it's no big deal, but it'll end up with that they'll have less money. And the reason for that is there's transaction costs for us to go from dollars to Bitcoin and then to transfer it to them. And so it's actually easier for them just to get paid in cash and then buy Bitcoin on their own.
Let me ask you a little bit while we're talking about the Mavericks here, your policy on vaccinations that they've got to show proof that they've been vaccinated, right? That applies to your fans as well, though, right?
No, two different things. Our relationship with the players and in terms of vaccination, that's all driven by the collective bargaining agreement and negotiations we have with the union. And so that's done by the NBA.
But the NBA states that is policy,
now,
right? The NBA states that's policy, right?
Correct.
Got it. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Correct. Now, in terms of everybody else, we that work in the basketball side of operations and on the business side of operations, we require vaccination.
This whole issue of vaccinations, though, when you tell those who go to Maverick games, this is the preseason right now, but that they have to be vaccinated, show proof of that. I believe masks as well. Are you afraid that they just won't show up?
No. So two things. One, if you have a proof of vaccination, that's good enough. You upload it to our app, and that's all you need to do for one time a year. If not, let's say you have COVID, we still want to have proof that that natural immunity is working and you don't have COVID. You just have to show a negative test from within the previous 3 days. So if you're vaccinated, it's easy. If you're not vaccinated, it's easy as well.
Let me ask you a little bit about the battle, the national anthem. Texas now has this Star Spangled Banner Act that requires teams in the state to play the national anthem. Do you do that now? Do you just follow the law now that it is the case in Texas?
Yeah, we did. Look, when we stopped playing the national anthem, it was more because I wanted to see if anybody noticed.
Really?
Nobody did until one person noticed 13 games in.
Wow.
Yeah, nobody. We went 12 games without playing it and not a. Now we didn't have fans then, but all the media, all the players, all the staff, all the administration, there were hundreds of people there. Nobody said a word. And honestly, after I didn't play it the first game, I expected somebody to say something and we would go right back to it. But that didn't happen. And then, when it was noticed and it became an issue, and I honestly had forgotten that we weren't playing it, I was fine with not playing it. I was fine with playing it going forward from there. But, in dealing with the response to it, there were a lot of people that were appreciative and there were a lot of people who weren't. And I got to learn both sides.
Why did you not play it to begin with?
Simply because, when you go to a game and when the anthem is typically played before the game starts, most people aren't there. And while the anthem's being played, a lot of people are walking around the concourse, not stopping. A lot of people won't take their hats off, won't put their hand over their heart. That bothers me. I mean, I'm a stand up, put your hand over your heart guy. And that bothered me a lot. And to me, it was like, well, if they don't care enough to be there on time and they don't care enough to stop on the concourse, let's see if anybody really cares. They didn't.
Interesting. Let me switch gears and talk a little bit of what's going on in Washington. You're the target group to pay for this package. In fact, I think your taxes alone could pay for this package. But that aside, I'm wondering what you make of this push to tax wealth besides. Now, that there are different ways it pops up here. But what do you think about that? It's one thing for income, but wealth, which seems to be a moving target, is quite another. What do you think of it?
Yeah, so two things there, as you said. I don't have a problem paying more taxes, whether it's business or personal. We've been at 39.7% before, and that's fine by me. We've been higher than 25% for corporate. That's fine by me. I'm good either way. Am I happy, with the way the government spends it all the time? No, but that's a different topic. In terms of taxing unrealized gains, I think that would be a disaster. I think, honestly, I don't think Elizabeth Warren knows that all what she's talking about when she deals with this. I think she just likes to demonize people that are wealthy, and that's fine. It's a great political move for her. But, I just don't think that they really understand the implications of taxing unrealized gains. People are going to have to sell things they otherwise would not sell. People are not going to make the same investments. The type of investments I might make on Shark Tank may be completely different if I think that a company, if I'm going to have to pay unrealized gains, I might have to retain capital so I can pay those unrealized taxes on unrealized gains. So, I know it will change behavior. I know it'll change investment attitudes and approaches. And I just think, and I also think it would hurt the market. Now, I do understand what their goal is, what I think their goal is, which is trying to help bring people up from the bottom, right? To help people, to help reduce income inequality, which I think is something we definitely have to address. But the way to do that is not just, trying to tax unrealized gains. I would have no problem if there were incentives or programs that incented companies to provide stock to employees, all employees, and even did something that created a ratio in terms of stock that's issued to the CEO versus stock that's issued to the least paid employee. Because by offering stock or warrants or options to the least paid of all employees, you're giving them appreciable assets. And the only way to allow the bottom to try to keep up with the top earners and those with the top wealth, like myself, is not to change the incentives for investing and tax unrealized gains. It's to enable appreciable assets for those that traditionally don't have them. That's the change that needs to happen.
Could I ask you a political question? As you know, Donald Trump seems to be all but running in 2024. He hasn't said so, but he's certainly doing all the things that a potential candidate does. Now, you were considering running in 2016 when it looked like he was. If he does again, would you?
No, no interest at all. Yes, again, I didn't run before because of family, and it's just not something I want to do. I think, I've always been apolitical until 2016 came along, and I just think I can have greater impact in other areas. I created something called the Cost Plus Drug Company, where we're taking on big pharma. We're doing some other things in terms of drug discovery that I think will have an impact. I created the Mark Cuban AI boot camp for underprivileged kids across the country. There's just so many different things that I'm finding I'm able to do that have an impact that I think that's more important to me right now.
So when Donald Trump is polling even or slightly better than Joe Biden at this point, it's very early, obviously, how would you feel if he returned to the White House?
Look, woulda, coulda, shoulda, all the hypotheticals, there's no point in getting into those, Neil. We'll see what happens in 2023 and where we're at.
Were his policies better for you as a very successful businessman than Joe Biden's now?
No, look, we're only 9 months into Joe Biden's term. How many CEOs have you interviewed that have come in to turn around major corporations, and 9 months in or 3/4 in, would you ask them, why aren't you completely turned around? I mean, you can go IBM, GE, any number of companies that have brought in new CEOs. You don't turn around corporations in 9 months, let alone make significant changes to a country. And look, there's no point in arguing the policies of one versus the other, because we're only 9 months in.
So when you say turn around, the Trump people will obviously say, Mark, well, he had nothing to turn around. That is, Joe Biden had nothing to turn around before the pandemic hit, and we were coming out of the pandemic. The economy was on fire. The unemployment rate had sunk to 3.5%. There was nothing for him to turn around. What do you make of that argument?
Well, look, the pandemic did hit, and it hit during the previous administration, and more power to them for, initiating the vaccine. And that's been a miracle and amazing. Now you have to implement it. And now just like we dealt with the origin of the pandemic, we had to deal with the changes with the Delta variant. We've had, honestly, I never thought that there would be the vaccine hesitancy that there is. To me, it was a miracle of science, and the Trump administration deserves credit for initiating it. But now we're having all these questions about why not to get it, which to me is crazy. And so that is a black swan type event that this administration has to deal with. So, in terms of what was good, what was bad, look, the last administration, there were some things I liked, a lot of things I didn't like. I didn't like the uncertainty. I didn't like the tweets. I didn't like him firing everybody. I didn't like him putting himself first. But, there were some business policies that were beneficial to me. With the Biden administration, I like that we're trying to deal with income inequality. I just think we're doing it the wrong way. I think it's smart to try to invest in education and healthcare and prenatal, just a long list of things that I look at as investments and other people look at as expenses. To me, if you improve the education of, preschool and, grade school, then that's going to pay dividends in a workforce going forward. There's just so many things we need to invest in this country, infrastructure. How are we going to compete in the world if we're behind with AI? And I think the Biden administration is rightfully placing an emphasis there.
Does it bother you that it costs so much money, and a lot of the things you're addressing are part of this, but not all of this?
Does it bother me? Again, it's an investment. The question isn't how much we're spending. The question is what kind of return can we get on it? We know what the expense is right now when we don't help people with healthcare, when we don't help people with early education, when we don't help people go to work because they don't have daycare. There are just so many things that we just continue to pay for as if we hope it'll go away someday, and it never will. We need to make investments to change that. And so I'm all for investing. Look how many, trillions of dollars are being invested in technology because they expect a return. I believe in investing in the American people, and I believe in investing in putting people in a position to succeed. And to me, that's what a lot of this spending is. So, I think we completely undervalue intellectual capital in this country. I think we're much stronger technologically and economically than GDP represents. And I think we do need to invest more, but we need to start looking into that as an investment. Now, can we argue whether or not we have the best people in place to make those investments or to enable those investments? Absolutely. I can talk all day long about how I think the political duopoly is horrible for this country and how we need to introduce ranked choice voting or some other multi-vote system. Because the one thing we know for certain that is neither party is giving us the best candidates, and all candidates and all politicians seem to pander to, people they think will vote for them or donate to them in the primary, and those are typically the more extreme voters. And so there's so many things that need to take place in order for us to get to, I think, a place where this country is moving forward. And a lot of it starts with how we choose and elect our candidates and the politicians we vote for.
So finally, my producer will kill me, but I just love talking to you to get your thought on things. It's clear you're not running for president right now. Would you run for anything else?
Hell no.
Okay, I'll take that as a no.
Nope.
All right.
I'd run around with my kids. That's about it.
Okay. Mark Cuban, very good seeing you again. The owner of the Dallas Mavericks, a multi-billionaire. Mark Cuban, interesting read on markets and sports and mandates and so much more.